Well, hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Wild Your Garden. Now, today's video has a bit of a different feel, I'm afraid, to the norm. Now, if you saw my recent video of what I would say vandalism of a lengthy section of elm trees that housed a population of white letter hair streaks near a wildlife garden that I'm creating at the moment in Huntingdonshire, then you will probably guess that I think that nature needs a bit more of a voice than it currently has. And in today's video is a message that is very, very close to my own heart. It's somewhere that I basically grew up, and these woods behind me are Bourne Woods in South Lincolnshire, which are a Forestry Commission owned woodland that I basically cut my teeth on everything wildlife in. I spent so many days, hours of my life in these woods. It's where I first saw my first whitethroats. It's where I've found great spotted woodpecker nests, seen countless nuthatches, tree creepers, and I really got to grips with the birding world as a teenager, and even before then, coming into these woods, because I grew up I was brought up a mile or so from these woods, so a really, really sentimental place for me. And I was recently informed that these woods are due to have 7,000 tonnes of timber removed from them as part of the Forestry Commission's ongoing management plan, which I accept. You know, we all need timber at the end of the day, and there's a few elements that I'd like to highlight today, however, that I think are questionable. There's a few practices here that I think need looking at, a few decisions that have been undertaken that I don't think stand in line with current legislation and the law, and I'm hopefully going to show you some of those and create a bit of a debate as to what should be done about them. So let's take a look into the wood and see what we can find. So to give you a bit of a background about these woods are a mixed deciduous woodland, but they have got some plantations of coniferous species such as spruce, which is obviously planted for production timber, but it's predominantly ash, oak and larch, which are throughout the woodland, which have been planted obviously many years ago for production timber. And the first thing I noticed about this woodland, it's just absolutely alive with birds. Within a couple of minutes of being in here, got chiff chaff over there. That's a nuthatch, blue tit, wood pigeon, very angry nuthatch. It's not really. There's wren. I've had a great spotted woodpecker just fly across over here. There's a blackbird singing in the distance. It's just teeming with birds. There goes the nuthatch across the path, if you saw that. And it's actually prospecting that leaning ash there. Oh, there's a pair. Well, where there's a pair, there's bound to be a nest. And I'm not sure. Oh, sparrowhawk just gone through up there. I don't know if you saw that. I'm coming back round. I think the sparrowhawks actually have, I'm not certain, but it's a good possibility. They like to nest in coniferous species quite often in old rook nests or crow nests. And there's a conifer just through there, which I think there's probably nesting in. It's just alive with birds. Incredible. So whether the nuthatches, they are a hole nesting species, and they rely on species such as ash, where they nest in the hole, and they have a classic trait where the nuthatch will actually plaster some mud around the edge of the hole to make the hole the right size to help stop any predation from birds such as great spotted woodpeckers, which obviously can eat the eggs and the chicks of most species. And they were prospecting that leaning ash tree. I'll keep my eye on that for a minute. Anyway, my point being, it's now the 22nd of March. It's getting towards the end of April, and there's a very important piece of legislation which I'm going to explain to you now. So under the Wildlife and Countryside Act of 1981, it is actually a criminal offence to disturb or deliberately damage or harm any nesting bird. That doesn't matter whether it's a wood pigeon, a collar dove, common species, or a blue tit or nightjar, whatever it is a criminal offence, and you can be prosecuted and sent to prison for up to 6 months for deliberately disturbing or being caught disturbing a nesting bird. As I say, there are no exceptions to that. All nesting birds are covered under that act. If you don't believe me, check out the RSPB's website for all the legislation on that. And speaking of nesting birds, this box here has been prospected by a blue tit just a few moments ago, which I'll put a clip in now of. It was going in and out of the box, in and out, so no doubt looking for a potential home. And along with this one, there are over 100 boxes like this throughout this part of the wood and other parts of the wood. So a huge potential for nesting birds at this time of year. Now, as it's towards the end of March, it is prime nesting season. The nesting season in law goes from March until August inclusive. So quite a wide nesting period, obviously, for most birds. Some birds will have 2 or 3 broods, obviously. Now, that's fine. And all said and done, what's your point, Joel? Well, I'll tell you my point. That box there, we've just been looking at, has been surrounded by pink dots, which is this tree, that tree, one through there, that one, it's hard to see, that one, and that one there. They all have pink dots on them, which means they are due to be felled within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would take us well into April and well into the bird nesting season. Now, my point being, along with that box there, and along with the vital habitat that is low down cover, such as brambles, which is where you'll get all your nesting blackcaps, chiffchaffs, willow warblers, white throat, so many birds, wrens, robins, blackbirds, song thrush. The list is almost endless. Dunnock for low down scrub like that, because it's very good protection for them, and I've flushed many from those sorts of habitats while I've been walking through the wood over the many years I've been visiting it, not purposefully obviously, but then this vital habitat and that box there, if you can explain to me how should a blue tit nest in that box, which very good chances that they will, how these birds are not going to be disturbed. Now, and I don't see why, I'm sorry to say, I don't see why a government run body such as the Forestry Commission should be exempt from that law or those rules. If something is protected in law, and it is a law and it's a criminal offence to disturb these birds, how is it so that it's one rule for one and one rule for another? Now, up the track behind me up here, where I'm going to head in a moment, there are reports, well, I know that there have been forestry works going on, and there has been a massive destruction up there, which, given the machinery needed to carry out these works, is kind of inevitable, but questionable, I think. So I'm going to go and take a look up there in a moment. But yeah, so just because you might look at this and think, well, actually there is no destruction, what are you talking about? But I know the plan is to come this far down, right the way down to the entrance of the wood here, through talking to local residents, people who know the plans for the Forestry Commission. Well, and if nothing else, nuthatch going past again, if nothing else, you can see by all the pink dots that these have been marked up, and these were marked up months ago. So a bit more of a debate to have on that. Let's head further into the wood and see what we can find. Now, I feel, before I go any further into this video, and before you guys venture any further as well, I ought to probably explain that this is not a video that is a sole attack on the Forestry Commission. I understand, I'm fully aware that woodlands are managed mostly for production timber. Now, Bournewood is not a publicly owned wood, it's owned by the Forestry Commission, and it's a wood that, there are people allowed to come into this wood. There's a public car park, and it's a fantastic haven. If I hadn't have had this on my doorstep, which I feel incredibly privileged to have had access to, because it's such a mixed, varied wood. There's some amazing habitats. There's some wonderful big ponds in the middle, which I'm hoping to get to today, because apparently all the toads are spawning over the last few days, so I'd really love to see that. But it's not a publicly owned wood, so it needs managing, it needs upkeep, it needs a woodland manager, and that all needs paying for. So I understand that these, again you can see pink dot after pink dot, there's 50 trees, by the way, just down there where I started, 50 trees marked up for where I was to be felled, just in the first, well, 30-40 yards more through here. So I just want to give you a feel for the amount of timber that's coming out. 7,000 tonnes is not a small amount. It's not just the ash tree, it's the larch that's further in, which we'll get to look at. But going back to my original point, this wood needs maintaining. There's a cost involved, obviously, in maintaining the paths, the rides for the public, the car park, the toilets, everything else. So obviously the natural product of a woodland is timber. Now, we all need timber, and yes, I'm all for people who go off-grid and build their own little wooden cabin and claim to be having no impact on the environment. However, still using wood from trees that are felled, you're still needing to heat that house, no doubt with firewood. So, you know, I'm fully aware of the responsibilities the Forestry Commission has to manage these woodlands as part of a public space, and I know they come under fire all the time from the public about management techniques, management practices, but I feel this one is justified. The points I'm making are justified. So as we get into this area now, you can see instantly the landscape is changing, and that's what makes these woods so special, is it is a variety of habitats. This is mostly larch, again a very good production timber, one that used for larch cladding and all sorts. A lot of timber value in larch as a tree, so you can see none of that has been marked. But I'm just going to have a talk to you about a different part of this conversation right now. Nice flock of siskin there. Now, I thought I'd show you this bit. It's a nice little block of birch. Birch is not a species that I mentioned earlier, but there are pockets of birch in here. Really nice, really good for a lot of species of bird. I've just had coaltit as well in a lot of these coniferous trees, which look to be Douglas fir. Again, another good production timber that is grown and harvested a lot, particularly in Scotland. And it's such a variety of habitats. I mean, you've got low down scrub here, you've got hazel coppice, obviously a really, really good habitat. But the next point I wanted to make is actually on ash dieback. Now, ash dieback is a disease that has been around for about 30 years, but it's only recently colonised the UK. And the Woodland Trusts actually believe that in time we're going to lose about 80% of our ash trees. Similar to what I was explaining in one of my recent videos about Dutch elm disease. A real shame ash dieback it's come from Asia initially, where it didn't really affect too many Asian trees, or what it did they could recover from, but it's hit our ash trees, and it's a real shame because it's just decimating the trees. Some of them are able to fight back, but it does kill them eventually, so a real shame. But I think a lot of the mitigation around the ash tree removal, in particular down that part of the wood, is due to the disease, and I'm sure the Forestry Commission would rather have a viable, what's known as green product before the ash dieback hits them. Although there's an argument for that if it was going for firewood, then obviously it's not the end of the world what condition the ash is in, because it will of course burn very well. Now, the contradiction to that is that part of the legislation around ash dieback is that you're not supposed to move the timber, because it can spread the disease, whether on foot or through the machines, or actually moving the timber through the the harvesters and everything that moves them. So who's right and who's wrong? Again, I don't know the full extent of the law around it. It's a very grey area, and I don't think a lot of the time, a bit like COVID, the government doesn't seem to know what to do, because it's been such a gut punch to the natural world and to the timber industry, because I've not been able to plant ash trees or buy ash trees for a few years now, because you're not allowed to grow them, you're not allowed to transport them through risk of spreading the disease. So such a shame, because they are a wonderful, wonderful tree, and a unique and quite stable component of our landscape. If we do eventually lose 80% of our ash trees, that's going to have a massive impact on so many nesting birds, associated insects and everything else. So yeah, I think ash dieback is part of the reason for what's going on down there, but let's see what else we can find up here. So I've just come off the beaten track to just adjacent to the main track through this east side of the wood, and I've actually noticed a lot of these green dots, which I haven't heard come up in conversation with some of the local residents that I know, some people who are regular walkers of this wood, and some people who are in the know about what's going to happen through this wood. I'm not sure whether the green, I assume, a tree that is marked is usually for removal. That's certainly my experience. And again, I'd like to reiterate at this point, I was a tree surgeon for 10 years. I have undertaken coppice management works. I've undertaken felling works to create woodland openings and rides for the improvement of habitats. So again, I'm not in any way condemning the actions here, but these green dots, if they are to be felled, and there are a heck of a lot going through there, what's going to happen to this absolute carpet of bluebells through here? Now, I just thought I would document this, because of course if I come back in 2-3 weeks time and find what I suspect I'll find, which is roots of devastation and piles of brash stacked on a clear indicator of ancient woodland, I mean all through here it's just the shoots of bluebells coming up, well then we have to question our management techniques and what is viable. Yes, okay, the bluebells will inevitably come back in places, but I'm just very anxious to see the extent of the devastation that's going to be further into the wood. And I would say at this point as well that I'm fully appreciative, because this is a nice kind of open, semi-open woodland glade, hence the bluebells are doing very well here, and that's because you've got a lot of this hazel coppice, which is a very old form of woodland management. Hazel coppice used for many things over the years. Timber, obviously for logs, it's great because it always regenerates very quickly, a very sustainable resource, and it's a shame that there aren't more hazel coppiced woodlands, because they're a really good habitat. Those lower down stems that are really dense, like this young specimen here, really good for nesting birds, lower nesting birds, things such as marsh tit, coal tit, many different species, which will obviously use those parts of the shrubs to nest, which is great. But so again, opening this area up wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing, because the hazel coppices are really good for nesting birds and that kind of mid-story layer. In a woodland, you don't just want the full height of 60-foot trees with nothing underneath, because actually in many circumstances that's where you find a bit of a void of life. You don't find so many nesting birds and tit species and everything else, because they haven't got that they haven't got that protection, that kind of mid-height layer. So a good thriving woodland is going to have a variety of layers from the woodland edge right the way over there, kind of the longer grasses, the meadows, through the brambles, coming up through the mid-height layer and up into the mature trees such as the oaks. So yeah, I mean, look through there, it's a wonderful bit of wood. This really is just gorgeous, hence why again the bluebells are doing so well. But again, it'd just be interesting to see how this place looks in a few weeks time, so let's carry on. Now this is an interesting find, cracking little wildflower. This is the wood anemone, for those of you that don't know, and a real good indicator of ancient woodland. Now wood anemones take so long to establish and spread, but unfortunately it's in an area that is marked with green dots. So it will be interesting to see exactly what happens with the understory here. I mean, the whole thing behind me is bluebells. I can't wait to come back here in about 3 weeks time, I would suspect, early April, or mid-April should I say, when this will be at its peak, no doubt. But by then it might look like a very different landscape. One thing I have noticed, and that is good, is that some of these trees, you can see with the red tape round there, this whole part of this hazel, have been highlighted as important sites for wildlife. So whether that's got nesting cavities for bats, roosting potential for bats, nesting birds in it or around it. I'm not going to stick around here too long just in case, but it's obviously been highlighted by the Forestry Commission ranger, who I know very well. I won't name him, but I know very well. Did a lot of ringing with him in these woods when I was a boy. So yes, very fond memories of being in here and looking at bird boxes that were often in the base of some of the hazel coppices, where they would be a very good habitat for nesting birds, as I've already said. So fingers crossed things like this get noticed and left, and yeah, we'll see what happens. Let's go and have a look for some more stuff. Well, here is another example of a tree that has obviously been marked with green, as you can see, but then I think as an afterthought, well, not necessarily an afterthought, but has then had the chance to be inspected by the forestry ranger, who has put the tape around it, which I suspect indicates, because of the ivy in this tree, its value for wildlife, and in particular probably a known bat roost. I'm not 100% sure, but I can't see why that would be anything else than or anything other than a bat roost, because it is marked. None of the other trees really around here are marked, and it's the only one I can see with ivy on it. Ivy, of course, a great cover for so many things, even brimstone butterflies, which are on the wing now, to overwinter in. Really too many things to name that are of benefit for having ivy around them. But yeah, hopefully this tree is still standing. Time will tell. So this part of the wood, as you can see, is Diana's Glade, which was set up by the Friends of Bournemouth as a commemoration of Princess Diana, of course, in 1999. So there's a lot of trees to be marked through here. I'm sure there won't be too many happy people if this ends up trashed, as I suspect it possibly might. So yeah, I don't think I'm very far now from where the works are at the moment, so just a few more meters and should be there. So I'm starting to get into where some of the works are being undertaken now. Usual log sacks there, but as you can probably hear up here, somewhere in the ash or oak is a chiffchaff, migratory species from the from Africa, which comes here to breed every year in the low growing shrubs and scrub. So the kind of the blackthorn thickets, the dog rose, the brambles, particularly low down nesting species. So yeah, right where these works are going on, I'm guessing, as that is a very vocal individual. That's probably a male on territory, so this is his domain, and this is where these works are being carried out. So let's go and have a look at a bit more of it. Well, if you didn't believe me before, you can see a nest box on there with actually the beginnings of a woodpecker hole just above it, so potential for a nesting woodpecker there as well. And here is a felled oak tree within 5 meters of that tree. If any birds were nesting there, I'm not sure if they are, I haven't been around long enough to see. But not only that, we've got another nest box there and another one on that tree behind it, and another one on that tree, which is next to this brash, which has still got to be removed, unless it's staying there, I don't know. But if none of that is the case, most of the oak trees through here have got green dots of them on them. So again, unless nobody turns up to this wood after August, on paper a crime is being committed, but everybody's blissfully walking by. To be fair, as they probably would. I mean, you're not really going to notice. Well, no, you can notice those green dots on the trees. They're pretty obvious. And the fact that there's stacks of logs back here as well indicates the works have already been carried out, but these have yet to be collected and taken to the main ride down there, which is where the timbers will be collected by the lorries from. So again, just in this small area, there are 4 bird boxes, which potentially might have nests in them, or young in them. There's blue tits around here for sure. So words fail me, really. Well, for those of you that don't know, and I'm not going to go too close to check, but that is a tawny owl box. One of many within this part of the wood. I'm not sure whether there is a resident in it. Of course, they could still use that box for potentially roosting during the day. So I'm not going to go too close, but look at this. The destruction around that box. Again, I'm not saying there is a breeding bird in it, but I'm not aware of any surveys that have been carried out other than the fact these birds are probably on eggs right now, if they are in that box. Yeah, all this is going on around it, so I can't say whether that constitutes for disturbing a nesting bird, because I don't know that there is one in there, but clearly there's an effort to attract them to this area. So yeah, I don't think I need to show you more than that, guys. Well, I've now reached the main ride, sadly, and if you can see there, box number 81, this is what it's living next to. This is obviously the main track that they're coming out with all the timber of to stack along the roadside for all the timber lorries to come down this ride. And it's not just there. Look at that, I mean, the devastation. So apparently this is an appropriate time of year to carry out these works. It goes on and on behind me as far as the eye can see. Now, correct me if I'm wrong again, but I'm not sure how a blue tit going in and out of that box there, which is clearly either building or might be the male feeding a female if she's on eggs, is not going to be disturbed by the constant passing of tractors and lorries along here. I don't know what the dimensions are in terms of what you should thought it went in again then, what you should permittably give a nesting bird. It depends. I couldn't see any legislation on it, but I'm pretty sure 3 meters from the box is a little too close for comfort for these birds. So again, I'm only pointing out the facts, but the state of this, I mean, how is that going to recover as a soil structure now that it's had that kind of churning and everything squashed in? Anything that was there, whether it's bluebells or anything like that, and it's just all away. I mean, you can probably just make out through there just a trail of destruction into the woodland, I'm afraid. Just to give you an idea of the scale of timber that's coming out of these woods, this is me. There's the top of the stack of Scots pine there. This looks like it's western red cedar, and it just goes on and on and on down the bottom. So not quite sure how all this timber is being removed, and there's lots yet to come towards the end of March without clearly, like that chap singing next to me, the chiff chaff, disturbing nesting birds. Well, there you saw, case in point, one of the timber lorries turning up to pick up these sacks of timber, which to be fair is not having much of an impact because they're on this hard road. Then there's no way they're going to get into that. But look at that, just obliterated. I mean, there's not a lot of coming back from that. And unfortunately, there's not the funds in timber extraction and the sale of timber to get somebody back in to level this out, to reseed it, to anything. So that'll just be left whatever happens at the end of this. So if anybody goes wandering off over to there, I don't know, they could break an ankle from a safety perspective, but it's the wildlife impact I'm thinking about. I'll just have a quick wander over with you. I mean, these are pretty deep ruts. It's like being on Mars. Look at that trail of destruction, and more Scots pine there, and it just goes on and on and on as far as the eye can see. Just see a timber lorry going off down the track there, but this is just, yeah. I mean, there were goat willows down here. I've not only the birds, but there's purple emperors that have recently colonised Bournemouth, the butterfly. So I've seen them on this track, this very track, just down the bottom there. So all this wet area where the goat willow, where the sallow were, there's no more larval food plants for the purple emperors. So, well, I'm sort of venturing into the first area where it looks as if it's mostly oak that's been removed from this woodland edge, which was quite a light sort of semi-open clearing, as you can see. What was a muntjac there crossing the track. But you can see the tracks here and the tracks behind me there. Now I understand, you know, shifting heavy timber requires heavy machinery. However, yeah, it's not too wonderful to see. Well, I'm quite sorry to say, guys, that what I've found here is nothing less than shameful, really. I don't know if you can make out. I'll put a few clips in now. I'm trying to keep my distance, but just there, with some fresh earth there, and just there with some more fresh earth, are two evident signs of badgers. Now, I know full well these are here because I just spoke to a passerby who walked past and is a regular walker of this area, and you can see there's a path that runs near to where these badgers are. Very little foot traffic, of course. But he says quite often when he walks the dog here in the evenings, he can see the cubs coming out, which of course you will be able to. So now you are not by law permitted to move or disturb badgers, and if there are badgers on your land, they have to go through a relocation program if you wish to remove them. So quite how, if you see the badgers there, when I turn this way, you can see the trail of destruction comes to about there, approximately 10 yards or 10 meters, maybe not even that, from where these badgers are. And actually there's another hole through there. So this is clearly a very active badger set. So clearly there's been no mitigation or ecological impact assessments done on this area to say that there are badgers here. You're not to work within these parameters. I'm not quite sure what the stats are with working around badgers and how close you can work to them, but clearly there's no evidence of any kind of care that's been undertaken when carrying out these works. So not only the badger disturbance, you can see here behind me the absolute trail of destruction these sorts of works leave, which I guess you can say you need big machinery, you've got to get in here, it's going to make a certain amount of damage. I've been told there are some huge ruts further in the wood, which I don't know if I'll find today, but this point that I want to make now is that all this brash is stacked on top of literally thousands and thousands and thousands of bluebells. As far as I can see, all of that green behind me is bluebell, and they're just starting to come into flower. So you tell me how bluebells are going to come back through that lot, whether they'll survive being covered in brash for the next 10 to 12 years while this lot rots down, who knows. There's obviously still a few carpets remaining, but you can see the extent of the bluebell cover through here. So quite how it is acceptable in this day and age to trash and squash and cover over an indicator of ancient woodland with no consequence or anybody to be held accountable for those actions, I'm not quite sure. It just seems to me like such a shame. It really is. I mean, again, I understand why these works have to be carried out. I understand that these are, again, it's a production line in essence. You're growing trees to fell them for timber. Yes, I get that. But There are more sensitive ways in which timber can be sustainably resourced. I'm absolutely sure of it. You know, we shouldn't have to trash the landscape in the process. It's just not viable. Certainly not in the long run, I don't think, anyway. Yeah, quite a shame, it really is. And so the final point I'd like to make is thus. So the final point I'd like to make, which is just reiterating what I said at the start of the video, is that all this timber is yet to be removed from this area. That's sure as hell not going to be left there now that they've gone through the efforts they've gone to remove it. That will now be extracted, took from this area onto the main ride where the lorries can drive in, loaded off the roadside and drive out on compacted stone paths. But the point I'd like to make is we're now fast approaching April. These works are still going on. You've seen the amount of green dots, pink dots through the woodland, right back down to the start of the wood, where trees are due to be felled. Now, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're nearly in April. So why are these works being allowed to be undertaken when there is viable habitat from here back to the main track, the main ride, a good mile or so of habitat at least, that is going to be destroyed and squashed and trampled, while you've got nesting wrens, blackcaps, willow warblers, chiffchaffs? I don't need to keep repeating myself. This is against the law. So why in this day and age are the Forestry Commission permitted to bend those rules to suit themselves, when in all honesty I think all that's happened here, because I know this woodland has been marked up for felling for a long time back in the winter, I know full well that it's probably down to the contractors being busy elsewhere and a case of we'll get to you when we get to you, which is just unacceptable in today's age. It really is. You know, we've lost so much woodland over the years, and yes, okay, this is being sustainably managed and it will be replanted. There will be mature specimens left to regrow throughout this area. And again, I get that, I get the practice, but it's the timing. You know, why does it have to be in March into April when there are nesting birds? God knows how many species this is going to affect, and it's going to be going on for the next 2 or 3 weeks, right when everything's going to be on eggs, right into the middle of April. So I will be back to document this. The only thing I can say is it should be down to the Forestry Commission to say, no, you are going to do this. I mean, a lot of the argument would probably be that the ground is too wet in the winter months. Well, you know, I haven't found them yet, but there is evidence of some enormous ruts through the particularly clay soils, and it completely annihilates the soil structure. When you send a 20-ton machine, when it's loaded up with logs, through an area like this, it just completely squashes the soil. It just completely squashes all the components. It just absolutely trashes the soil structure, the roots of other trees that are left, of course, it affects them. And the main point that I keep banging on about is, if you go on the government website, gov.uk, all of these bodies, people like Natural England, the Woodland Trust, it is under legislation that they have to be seen to be not disturbing wildlife, actively trying to promote wildlife conservation, and look at ways of not harming or disturbing wildlife. So it's there, it's all written down already. So why are there no prosecutions? Why is nobody shouting out about this? And why are people still allowed in this day and age, particularly somebody like Forestry Commission, to come in and do this at this time of year? Again, I will reiterate once more, for those of you that didn't quite get the message, I am not having a go at the Forestry Commission for what they do. Without the Forestry Commission, you wouldn't have access to woodlands like this, which I've been very fortunate to grow up in and around, so I'm very, very grateful for that opportunity. However, there needs to be some tightening up of the regulations, because as far as I'm aware, nobody's getting prosecuted, and nesting birds and God knows what else is being destroyed in the process, purely because, well, I think of timing. That's all it is. If you were to carry out these works in July, August, September, yes, okay, birds still could be breeding in July, but most of the migratory species, the warbler species, chiffchaff, the willow warbler, a lot of the black caps as well, they will already be thinking about heading back to Africa. So if you were to do it July, August, September, at least things have had a chance to breed and the forest can then recover. The ground is at its driest, of course, as well. So even in March, I mean, there's some very wet areas in the wood. So I cannot for the life of me understand why it's not being questioned that these works are being carried out at this time of year when it is in law, as I say. I'm not making this up. I'm not making up my own laws. Check out the RSPB's website. The Countryside Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981, section 1, I believe, about disturbing nesting birds. It's all there. It doesn't, I don't need to explain it. Read it for yourselves. And you know, I think we need to raise some awareness with this. We need to start asking questions, because if we don't, things like this keep happening throughout our countryside, and it drives me mental. Anyway, I hope that's given you enough cause for concern to have a think about things. You know, share this video, please, with whoever you can. I think education and information is just as important, and I'll leave you with this interesting comment as to why I think this is key to address right now. And that is that my good friend that came into the wood that first identified these works to me a little while ago came up to me and he said, "Joel, you know the one thing that I found the other day when I was asking one of the operators of the machines, the harvesters, that these £250,000 gigantic machines that come through and carry out these works," he said, I asked him, "Well, you know, what are you doing about the nesting birds then?" And his answer, genuinely, hand on my heart, this is what's been passed on to me, was, "Well, you know, we stop every few days to let the public come and have a look at the nests." Well, I mean, what if that doesn't tell you that, you know, and I'm not generalizing, but my assumption would probably be the majority of people carrying out these works, operating the machinery, are just seeing it as a job. They're not even thinking about the consequences. They're not even asking if there has been an environmental impact assessment done on the area to identify any nesting bird species or anything like that. And again, not even nesting, not even protected species have the sole benefit of being, you know, protected from the law. It is any nesting bird. It is any nesting bird that you find. It doesn't matter whether it's a wood pigeon, robin, a blue tit, or a black-throated diver. Not that you'll find one in here. They all have protection under the law. So let me know your thoughts, guys. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've seen anything like this. Again, I'm sorry this video hasn't quite been of the usual normal uplifting standard, but this is something that needs addressing, because why should it be one rule for one and one rule for someone else when it is there? It's already written down. Nobody's being prosecuted. And the amount of times that I've heard about people that have attempted to prosecute someone for felling a tree unlawfully when there's been a nest in it, I know, and again, no offense to the police, but they don't know what to do. When I've spoken to people that have dealt with the police in these situations, they don't know what to do, because there are so few cases of people being prosecuted for disturbing a nesting bird. It's such a shame. Anyway, I won't waffle on any longer. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Really appreciate the time you've given me today. I hope this has just opened your eyes a little bit as to what's going on further in our countryside and why we all need to be aware of the laws, the legalities, what you can and can't do, and why this is happening. You know, at the end of the day, we need to give nature a voice. Above all, because we lose the wildlife, we lose Mother Nature, and we've all had it, I'm afraid to say. So quite why, as the most intelligent, supposedly intelligent race on this planet, we are doing our very best to destroy it. God alone knows. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate the support. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Give the video a like, and I'll be sure to bring you many more videos on all the ways in which you can help wildlife in videos to come. I will, of course, be doing an update video on this in a few weeks' time once the works have carried on through there, so we'll just see how those areas are looking. So thanks very much. Stay tuned. I'll see you soon.